Hi everyone, today let's talk about Tesla. Then we'll jump straight into the charts. You can see Tesla is basically flat on earnings, surprisingly good result. And then we'll take a look at my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. I've been getting a ton of support recently and I really appreciate it. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Tesla earnings beat on revenue and earnings. They had a really good result. And this company continues to grow at a really fast rate. I did not think they would do as well as they did. You can see earnings per share, $1.19 versus the $1.13 expected. Revenue, $24.32 billion versus the expected $24.16 billion. That's compared to a year ago at $17.72 billion and on an adjusted earnings basis of $2.52. So earnings going down a little bit. This is kind of expected, but they did let us know that, and they beat on what they said that they were going to do. In terms of growth, they're growing at 33% year over year, which is just bananas, definitely extremely fast for a car company. And they do mention here that $467 million of their revenue did come from regulatory credits. These are the carbon credits that they get from other ICE manufacturers in order to balance out their carbon footprint. A lot of people say that this helps prop up Tesla, and it does to some degree, but they are definitely making money on their cars at this point. Automotive margins came in at 25.9%. Which they mention is the lowest number in 5 quarters. But honestly, this is still a pretty high number for cars. The other major manufacturers are definitely not producing cars at this same kind of margin. That's part of why Tesla is valued so high. Obviously, they have a big growth thesis, and they continue to grow really fast. But these margins, compared to like Ford or GM, are just really high. In terms of vehicles, they reported 405,000 vehicles delivered and a production of 439,000 vehicles on a period end date of December 31st. Full year deliveries came out to 1.31 million vehicles, which is a record for Tesla. Overall, pretty good. They are slowing down a little bit. Their earnings are down a little bit, but that is expected with a car company. But really, they did everything they said they were going to do, and that's why you see Tesla here up 0.33%, not down huge like I kind of expected them to be at this point. Moving over to the charts, starting with the S&Ps on the hour and the 4-hour. You can see we gapped down, came into the 144 EMA on the hourly chart, which is very close to the 200 SMA on the 4-hour. And then we bounced from there, pretty much rallied throughout the session, really aggressive. Kind of reminds me of the gap down that we had here, where we gapped down, went flat for a day, and then rallied really aggressively through the next session. Except in this case, we gapped down, did fall slightly, and then rallied really aggressively, and filled that gap within the same day despite the huge down move. In terms of momentum, you can see positive momentum on the hour, above the 50 line on RSI on the hour as well, and above the EMA. Everything looks bullish here on the hour chart. Momentum on the 4-hour is definitely fading though. Did have 1 hour of bullish momentum after that declining first candle. At this point though, you have to assume that this is still going to roll over. Kind of looks like a double topping style pattern. We're at resistance here. You can see we've been tracking this trend line for a very long time. This is the major trend line that we have, and we are just below that once again, testing it here today. And you would expect it to fail at this point. Maybe we go sideways for another day, kind of like we did here before. And then we get this kind of bigger double topping pattern at the trend line, with the neckline currently sitting at 394.50 or so, depending wherever you want to spot that. Looking over at the daily chart here just for a moment, you see momentum did step down today. Not a huge step down, just a slight one. RSI still looking kind of bullish here. You can see on that move down, we did test the 200 SMA on the daily chart, as well as the 9 EMA. Still in this bullish pattern, kind of in this wedge. Seems like we may overshoot it here and then get that bigger breakout to the downside. We get a pattern where we kind of push up tomorrow, maybe start to test these previous highs, or we go sideways and just kind of break off to the downside from right where we are. But right now we are kind of mixed on momentum. So the 4-hour and the daily stepping down, the hourly looking really bullish. And if we jump over to the 15-minute chart just for a moment here, you can see we had that big swing in bullish momentum, giving you that potential for a bullish trade, which I did not capitalize on quite as much as I should have. But you can see here, as we fade into the end of the session here, we're getting a little bit of divergence. We have higher highs, weakening momentum. And if this does roll over here tomorrow, that would be interesting. So we have the 15-minute correlating with the 4-hour and the daily chart at that point. Moving over to the NASDAQ on the 5 and the hourly, you can see I was looking at a wedge type pattern, and then we kind of broke out to the upside, tested below the trend, and then rallied pretty aggressively to fill the gap. Double topped here with weakening momentum. So we have a divergence here on the 5-minute RSI. So you would expect at least a little bit of a down move, maybe retrace into this 285, 285.30 area. This is still a bullish pattern, so you do have to respect that until it breaks down. We are above the 200 SMA on the 5-minute chart as well. So looking at maybe a 1% down move to support, then we'll have to see if we do get a bounce or a push through that support. We are also at resistance here. You can see we do push up through this 288.70 level that I'll be watching tomorrow. Then we could certainly move up and retest these highs up around 290. So really that's what I'm looking for. Either a push up to 290 or a retest down to 285, 285.30. If I had to guess, I would say bearish, but I've been saying that for a while at this point. Let's take a look at the options volume for tomorrow just to see if we can get an idea of where we're going to be. So we have a pretty large amount of puts down here at 280. I wouldn't expect to get below 280. You can see that 284 level has quite a few puts as well. So 284 is probably going to be the low for the closing price that I would guess. I would expect to close above 284 for tomorrow. Then you have 285 calls here. So that's a pretty tight window. If we do land right in between there, it certainly would be good for Wall Street. I do like to take a look at this just to see where I think we're going to close out. Just for reference, here's today's chart. We had the 283 puts, didn't expect to get below there. And then we had 286 calls. We did finish slightly above that. So it's not always perfect, but it does give you an idea of where we might finish for the day. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow here, you can see they both filled the gap. Surprisingly, a lot of strength here in the Dow. So the Dow did not lag today. Russell didn't lag either. Everything filled the gaps. Everything looked pretty strong. Momentum on the hourlies here, both moving into positive momentum. Does seem like they could potentially break out tomorrow, like we talked about, if that bullish momentum does continue. Switching over to the 4-hour on both charts, you can see pretty decent momentum here on the Dow. The Russell is basically flat, maybe slightly bearish momentum. RSI does look pretty positive here, but really these could go either way at this point and potentially slightly bullish here. For the Russell, we're looking at 285 as support, did act as support once again here today. And then we're basically at resistance here, looking at that 188 level. If we do break that tomorrow, potential for a couple of points of up move, I would guess. On the Dow, similar thesis, 335, we have that low level. Did test that again today and did hold. And then we have the previous high, basically right where we're at, 337, maybe 338, to see which direction we're going to go from here. Moving over to Tesla, we'll give it its own window here today. Looking at the 15 and the 4-hour, you can see similar thesis, gap down, did fall at the beginning of the session, but rallied, filled the gaps, and actually made a slightly higher high here versus yesterday's close. In terms of after-hour pricing, did get all the way up to 150, got all the way down to 142 or so. But basically unchanged, really strong results. You can see momentum, however, on the 15-minute is starting to roll into bearish territory. It was kind of fading here into the end of the session, which is part of why we saw that move down, I think. 4-hour momentum, similar to the NASDAQ, also fading. RSI also fading, creating lower lows, despite very similar price action. So slight divergence on the 4-hour, as well as a bearish trend here on the 15-minute. So you would look for a move down tomorrow if we don't get that completion of the move down after hours here. Certainly looks like it might be fading here slightly into the after hours. Of course, this could move quite a lot based on their earnings call. This is just on the earnings result right now. Once you get that earnings call and their forward guidance, that could certainly move this stock quite a bit, just like we saw with Microsoft yesterday. Moving over to Apple and Microsoft, we'll put Microsoft in that slot for today because we had that big earnings announcement, rallied really aggressive up to 253, 254, gap down, got all the way down to 231, 231.40 or so, did fill the gap, did get all the way back up to 243. And then we started to fall after hours here. You can see momentum is building still on the hourly, but it does seem like we might get flatline and then a continuation to the downside, certainly possible here on the hourly chart. Definitely at resistance, did tag that, seems to have gotten a pretty good rejection at that point. Looking at Apple, very strong throughout the day, did not get up to that previous high, just barely filled the gap. You can see through a wick right up to the close, and it seems to be selling off after hours here. Apple earnings coming pretty soon, so definitely keep an eye out for that. But we tested support here once again at 139. That's the big line that we had on that bearish rising wedge. Very similar pattern to what we had actually on the day today on the NASDAQ, where we kind of swung up above it, swung below it, and then got a bigger move higher. Very similar pattern, actually, kind of eerily similar. But right now we do have support at 139, and then we're looking at resistance up at 143. We've gone sideways for about 3 days at this point, and we have to keep an eye out for which direction we're going to go next. Moving over to consumer staples and consumer discretionary, both of them rallied throughout the session after the gap down and both made new highs. So that's interesting. Buying in both sectors, neither one lagging at this point. That's very interesting. Looking at the hourly, you can see building momentum in both cases. So basically buying across the markets, not really picking one sector or the other. Pretty interesting. At this point, you would expect this breakout to carry us up to about 74 on consumer staples. And then when we look over at consumer discretionary, this is a little bit more interesting. Let's actually go full view on that because we have this expanding wedge at this point. So we have the low from 6 January and then the low here on 19 January. We tested that same trend line here again today and it held. So if we do get another move higher here tomorrow, that would be pretty interesting. You could maybe make a trend line kind of like this, giving you a price target up at 142, 143, just a couple of points higher. But if you're looking at this trend line, and you look at the expanding wedge, which is a bearish pattern, that would give you a much higher price target, more like 146, 147. Let's just move that down here, 146, 147, maybe 148. That would be a huge move from where we are right now. That would give consumer discretionary the bigger room to rally. That's definitely something to keep an eye out. Right now, we do have divergence on the hourly chart, so we have a new high with a lower RSI reading than we had the previous days, as well as the recent high looking at 18 January with that RSI read of 72.48. So lower RSI read, slight divergence to the bear side. But right now, this is still in a bullish pattern, and you have to be aware that it could go higher here, even if it's eventually going to roll over and move lower ultimately. Moving over to transports, this is definitely interesting here. So we gapped down similarly, did not fill the gap, did lag all of the major indices, not confirming the up move here on transports. Super interesting. Could not get above the 50 on the hourly RSI. We are right at the 50 here on the 4-hour. Similarly to the others, momentum is building on the hourly, but pretty bearish momentum here on the 4-hour. Basically flat from the 11 o'clock to 1500 candle. Definitely looking to see what that opens up at tomorrow. And you can see this divergence that we have going here as well. So the EMAs on the MACD trending downward pretty strongly. You have that equal height high here on Monday the 23rd, but much weaker RSI. But we have weaker RSI as well as weaker EMAs on the MACD. So definitely divergence, definitely weaker here. This could definitely be pointing to a significant down move. So keep an eye on this. Everything looked fairly strong today, but transports definitely lagged. Moving over to semiconductors on the hour and the 4-hour. We still have divergence on the hourly chart and the 4-hour at this point. Momentum on the 4-hour ticking down. We do have some bullish momentum on the hourly chart, so keep an eye on that. We also do not have the EMAs moving down yet. So we had that high, that swing, and then a higher high here. So EMA is still looking strong. This could certainly roll over potentially tomorrow, maybe the next day on the 4-hour chart. And if we do get that and semiconductors start moving lower, that would be bad for the NASDAQ specifically, but of course could be leading the markets lower as well. Right now, the structure is still bullish. We're in this pattern, still well above the 21. Did finish above the 9 EMA here on the 4-hour. But if you look at the hourly charts, it's been pretty mixed over the last 4 days and certainly seems like we could be rolling over tomorrow based on the RSI readings that we've been seeing on both charts. Looking at stocks above their 20 and 50-day moving averages, basically flat from the 23rd to the 24th. We'll definitely have to check in on this tomorrow before the open to see what the result was for today. But I would expect that it's going to taper off here on the 20. That would be interesting if we do get a little bit of divergence there. Stocks moving higher, but less stocks participating. Definitely a bad omen. But right now, it still looks okay. And we do have to look at that next candle to get any clear direction for tomorrow or the next day. Moving over to 10-year government yields. On the hourly chart, we're still stuck in that range that we talked about, 342. Tested that level once again, bounced slightly. Got pretty close to testing our upper range at 3.5 yesterday. So we tested the upper bound, tested the lower bound. Still waiting for some clear direction here. You would like this to break out if you're a bear, but right now we're still stuck in this range with no clear direction on yields. I would guess that's going to be the case until we get the FOMC on the 1st, which I believe is Wednesday of next week. Moving over to the dollar on the hour and the 4-hour. We broke out to the downside here. We have not gotten a rejection yet. We are at some support down here from the 23rd, the late hours of the 23rd, early morning hours here. So if we do get below this level, especially after hours here today, that could be bullish for stocks. The weakening dollar is also good for American businesses. Then they don't take so many losses on the currency exchange. So that would be good for businesses as well as equities, as long as this dollar continues to fade into tomorrow and the next day. Moving over to J&K on the 4-hour and the hourly chart, you can see we basically had the same day back to back here where we gapped down, rallied up, gapped down, rallied up. So some consolidation happening here for sure. We definitely have support at $93 and definitely some resistance up here at $93.50. Very tight range here on J&K. Momentum on the hourly, basically nothing. Momentum on the 4-hour, swinging slightly bullish here. Interesting. Definitely, if that goes higher tomorrow and confirms the rally, that would be interesting as well. Slightly higher close versus yesterday's close. Not by much, just slightly. But right now, this pattern is slightly bullish. You could certainly argue that this is a retrace consolidation. And if this breaks out of this range to the upside, that certainly would be good for growth and for stocks. You have to entertain that as a potential bullish scenario. Moving over to TLT, not a lot to say here. Gapped up, then filled the gap, and then moved sideways. Not a lot of movement here today. Still in a slightly bullish pattern, still staying above the 9 EMA on the 4-hour chart. Slightly bullish momentum. Did get down to that 0 line on the hourly and then ticked up here slightly at the end of day. So would expect this to move higher. It does seem like bonds are starting to move inverse to stocks and equities like they used to do. They were in tandem for a while there, but it seems like we're kind of moving a little bit more inverse now. So definitely keep an eye out for that. If bonds do go higher, like they seem to be looking like they will, that might be bad for equities. Definitely keep an eye on that. That's something that I'm looking at going forward. The inverse relationship does seem to be coming back, at least here a little bit. Moving over to the VIX on the hour and the 4-hour. Again, similar day to yesterday where we had a big up move, fell throughout the session, had that big up move, tested the 200 SMA on the hourly, and then fell throughout the session, basically to the same levels, maybe slightly lower here. But you can see a higher peak, which is interesting. So if we do bounce from here tomorrow, like we've been doing, and we get a higher peak, that would seem like a breakout. If we pull this trend line down, we got very close to it today. Potentially come up, retest that trend line or break through tomorrow. Definitely something to watch out for. But if this continues to break down to our next level of support, down at 18, that would be bullish for stocks. So those are two scenarios we're looking at. A break up to resistance up at around 20 or 2080 and a push through that level, or move back down to that 18 level and maybe even lower down to 1750 or so. Momentum is bearish on both the hour and the 4-hour. RSI pretty much at the same level it was yesterday to finish out the day. Could certainly bounce from there, and maybe it'll give you a little bit of guidance on where we're going to go tomorrow. Moving over to my positions, I did not do that well, lost about $200. I just don't do well trading trends. It's something that I'm not that good at, something that I'm working on. And really, I think the real answer is I need to trade options in trends. I seem to do better with either short puts or covered calls or vice versa when it comes to trends. I just could not get a hold of it here today. Yesterday, where we had a lot of choppy price action, I did really well. And that seems to be when I day trade the best. So not a lot to say here. Small loss, about 0.2%, which was about on par with the NASDAQ here today. In terms of my thesis for tomorrow, we still are in that bullish pattern. It does seem like we could go a little bit higher, especially with Tesla doing well on earnings. So slight bullish thesis for tomorrow. Certainly could get into resistance and break down tomorrow. So expect to be nimble. I don't know if I'm going to open any overnight positions, probably just day trading for tomorrow, but I'll be keeping an eye on the markets pretty much throughout the day. Let me know if you were impressed with Tesla like I was. definitely did better than I thought that they would, and where you think the market is going to go tomorrow. Is tech going to do well based on Microsoft and Tesla doing well so far? Or are we going to get pushed down the later we get into earnings? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. I make this video every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell and don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.